All the elders of Israel, the representatives of the people, went to Samuel and said, "Justice cannot be found in our land. We therefore have decided that we need a king to judge us, just like all the other nations." Samuel prayed to the Lord. In essence, the Lord replied, "Listen to what the representatives have said, for they have rejected the first tenet of self-government. The individual is answerable to a higher authority than man. This rejection of my authority and the rejection of my countenance in the selection of future kings will ensure henceforth tyranny under man's rule and earthly king."
Samuel was instructed to tell the representatives of the people what they and future generations could expect because of their decision. "An earthly king will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some will be appointed to run in front of his chariots. He will appoint your sons as captains over thousands, and captains over 50. And he will require them to till his ground and to reap his harvest. The king will take your daughters to be cooks and bakers. He will take your fields and your vineyards and your property and do with it as he pleases. The king will declare that it is the law. It is his right to take your children and your property. As the years turn into decades and the decades into centuries, you will plead for mercy because of the governmental system that you have demanded.
The kings of the earth would play the most destructive of all games, war. The American struggle for independence would, through the Declaration of Independence, declare that the Creator had endowed man with specific rights. Hence, earthly authority to abrogate individual rights does not exist. Although since the time of Samuel, earthly kings claiming the divine right of rule had forcibly circumvented individual inalienable rights. The following chart reflects the organization of society established through providential guidance. God's word given to man through the Bible would set the first and primary premise of a self-governing people. That is, the individual is responsible to a higher authority than government. His conduct is therefore regulated under the precepts of the Ten Commandments. All entities created by man would, under this system, never possess the authority to circumvent the individual's right to enjoy the benefits of life, liberty, and property. Under this structure, a court system was created where a vote of the people would determine which member of society possessed the qualifications to administer justice. Court actions would fall under checks and balances known as jury nullification. Nullification would curtail unjust rulings. The 1670 trial of William Penn provides an exemplary example of jury nullification. The king had charged William Penn with the crime of preaching and teaching a different view of the Bible than that of the Church of England. Today, this charge would be comparable with the individual's right to declare that homosexuality is a sin under God's law, and taking of life under the guise of a medical procedure is murder. Fortunately for William Penn, 4 jurors believed that the king did not possess the sole authority to determine how an individual should worship or preach from God's word and refused to render a verdict. They, the jurors, understood that William Penn's actions had injured no one. The king imprisoned the jurors for 9 weeks, during which time they were tortured, deprived of food and water, proper sanitary conditions, and threatened with fines. Ultimately, the jurors prevailed. The result, the jury may determine if the law under which the defendant is charged is lawful under God's law. Municipalities created under this framework would be vested with limited jurisdiction through a town charter. Conflicts and disputes that could not be settled between the town and an aggrieved party would be brought before a presiding judge elected by the people. Town actions were regulated by the people's direct vote to determine who was best suited to lead the town. A centralized religious authority, unencumbered by governmental entanglements, would fall under the guidance of a minister and elders. Advice and moral counsel would be available to everyone. Membership in the church, unencumbered by governmental entanglement or license, would ensure that historical facts needed to maintain a free society would be taught. This would support and propagate the hallmark of Christian character: love one another as you love yourself. The preceding chart depicted the basic tenets of a free society created by early Americans. First, that God's Word is given to all men through His revealed Word, the Bible. Because of their allegiance to a sovereign God, their actions would be regulated under the guidelines of the Ten Commandments. The early Americans created local municipalities with limited responsibility through a town charter, a court system to resolve disputes, interact with citizens, and would be regulated by a direct vote of the people. A religious authority would be regulated not by government, but by ministers and elders. Members of the congregation received advice and counsel.
The next chart reduces to its simplest form the relationship between a central religious authority and the state. With the exception of the American form of government, this chart is applicable to all other church-state partnerships. The relationship between church and state in England during the 1700s could be depicted with the ruling monarch and the centralized religious authority bolstering their position in the eyes of the people by claiming that their authority was derived from God's revealed Word, the Bible. The partnership was beneficial to both entities. In the early part of the 20th century, Joseph Stalin, communist dictator of Russia, would come the closest to a total merger of church and state. He would abolish the centralized religious authority and replace God's Word with his brand of atheism. Stalin would order the removal of all religious icons from every home, replacing it with his picture. Thus, church and state would become one. Resetting the chart, let's see how Adolf Hitler would alter the base formula. He would establish a belief system based on Nordic folklore and other sundry beliefs that furthered his agenda. Next, the organized church would, under his regime, assume a far more sinister appearance. The basic chart could be applied to a culture or society that does not have a written language. The book of basic written beliefs would become a set of oral traditions passed from one generation to the next. The system would retain a central religious authority and would secure the allegiance of the people.
The French Revolution would set the pattern for future communist revolutions and the murder of millions of people. Over the centuries, the French had developed a society structure based on the same pattern as other European countries. The French dynasty claimed that a hereditary monarch was divinely authorized. The king would therefore maintain a working relationship with the centralized religious authority. The French religious authority professed ultimate authority from Christian teachings. The benefit from this mutual back-scratching created a de facto partnership between church and state, an unhealthy state of affairs. The precarious partnership would succumb to the philosophy of enlightenment. Followers of enlightenment believe that religion is superstition and harmful to society, and that man would progress to the point where the reason of man will set the moral and ethic framework for society. If man continues down this path set by the communists, our future will mirror the terror of the French Revolution.